For over 150 years, every Western scientist who saw this assumed the same thing. European sailors must have come, colonial traders must have left children behind, some foreign blood must have mixed in somewhere. Every single one of them was wrong. In 2012, researcher Sean Myles personally traveled to the Solomon Islands, village by village, and collected DNA samples from over 1,000 people. He brought those samples back to Stanford University, where Professor Carlos Bustamante and his team ran a full genetic analysis. What they found stopped them cold. The blonde hair in Solomon Islanders comes from a mutation in a gene called TYRP1 on chromosome 9. This single mutation explains 46% of all hair color variation in the islands. It arose around 10,000 years ago, right here in the Pacific. And here's the part that changed everything. This mutation does not exist in any European genome on Earth. Not one. Europeans have blonde hair through completely different genes. These two populations, one in Northern Europe, one on a remote Pacific island, arrived at the exact same physical trait through entirely separate biological roads. Professor David Reich of Harvard University called it, and I'm quoting him directly, one of the most beautiful examples to date of the mapping of a simple genetic trait in humans. But even he did not predict what scientists would find when they went deeper, because the blonde hair was only the door. Behind that door was something far older, far stranger. Something buried so deep in the Solomon Islander genome that it had been hiding there for 50,000 years. Why, and if you're someone who loves lost histories and ancient DNA mysteries, subscribe right now, because this channel is exactly where you need to be. Tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? And have you ever done a DNA ancestry test? Drop your answer below. I want to know. Now, let's go deeper. When scientists finished mapping the full genome of Melanesian populations, including the people of the Solomon Islands, they did not just find human DNA, they found something else. In 2016, Dr. Benjamin Verneau and Dr. Joshua Akey at the Department of Genome Sciences at the University of Washington published a study in Science Journal. They analyzed the complete genomes of 35 Melanesian individuals from 11 locations across the island chain. See, their conclusion? Between 1.9 and 3.4% of the Melanesian genome traces directly back to the Denisovans. Now, who are the Denisovans? They are an extinct species of ancient human. We know they existed because of one finger bone found in a cave in Siberia. That is all we have ever found of them. We have never seen their full skeleton, we have never seen their face, we do not know what they look like, and yet their DNA is alive inside Solomon Islanders today, but that is not all. Neanderthal DNA, approximately 2.74%, was also confirmed in the same genomes. So a child running barefoot on a Solomon Islands beach is carrying the genetic echo of not one, but two vanished species inside every single cell of her body. Dr. Verneau himself said, "I think that Neanderthals and Denisovans like to wander. Studies like this can help us track where they wandered. These ancient sequences were not just sitting there doing nothing. The archaic DNA in Melanesian genomes clusters around infection-fighting genes and brain development pathways. These old sequences helped these people survive. Now think about that. Two species that no longer exist on this earth, gone before any civilization was ever built, before any language was ever written, are still contributing to the survival of people living on these islands today. That is the power of what is locked inside this DNA." But then, a third researcher ran the numbers again, and what he found made even Dr. Akey's results look incomplete. Because after accounting for the Denisovans, after accounting for the Neanderthals, there was still something left over, and something that matched no known species on Earth. In October 2016, Ryan Bohlender, a statistical geneticist at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, stood before the American Society of Human Genetics and delivered a finding that silenced the room. He recalculated the Denisovan DNA in Melanesian genomes. Previous estimates had said 3 to 6%. Bohlender's new estimate, around 1.11%. That recalculation created a gap, a percentage of archaic DNA that could not be explained by Denisovans, could not be explained by Neanderthals, and matched absolutely no known species on Earth. His conclusion, a third, entirely unnamed archaic human, had interbred with the ancestors of the people of the Solomon Islands and Melanesia, and we have never found a single bone, a single tooth, nor a single fossil of this species anywhere on the planet. Bohlender himself said, "Human history is a lot more complicated than we thought it was." That might be the biggest understatement in the history of modern science. Now, here is what makes this even stranger. Solomon Islands oral traditions, stories passed down for generations on these islands, describe ancient beings who lived in the deep forests and the deep reefs before modern humans arrived. Scholars dismissed these stories for decades as mythology. After Bohlender's 2016 findings, no serious geneticist dismisses them anymore. A species that left no fossil, no ruins, no name. Their only monument is a fragment of DNA. Still alive, still moving, still being passed from parent to child on these islands right now. Tell me something in the comments. What do you think this third species was? An unknown ancient tribe? Something else? Write your theory below. I will pin the most interesting answer. But to understand why the Solomon Islands became this genetic crossroads, We have to go back, way back, about 40,000 years back. Researchers at the Institut Pasteur in France used whole genome sequencing on over 320 individuals from across the Pacific to confirm the very first humans reached near Oceania, including the Solomon Islands chain, approximately 40,000 to 50,000 years ago. These were the Papuan ancestors. They crossed open ocean, no maps, no compass, just stars, ocean currents, and memory passed from one generation to the next. They landed on volcanic islands that could not even be seen from the shore they departed from. And they stayed. The Y chromosome, the genetic marker passed from father to son, tells their story with scientific precision. A lineage called haplogroup M2 to M353 arose inside the Solomon Islands approximately 9,200 years ago. It is still the most common paternal lineage in Solomon Islander men today. This lineage was not carried from somewhere else. It was born here, on these islands. For tens of thousands of years, these people were sealed from the rest of the world. Their DNA evolved in isolation. Unique mutations, unique immune systems, unique pigmentation pathways. The blonde hair mutation, born right here, around 10,000 years ago. And their connection to the land was not just cultural, it was spiritual. Each volcanic hill, each reef system, each river delta had an ancestor spirit attached to it. This was not superstition. This was the encoded memory of 40,000 years of people who had never left. And then, about 3,500 years ago, something appeared on the horizon. Canoes. Many canoes. And the people on board were genetically nothing like the islanders already here. Their DNA traced not to New Guinea, not to Melanesia, but to Taiwan, 6,000 miles away. These newcomers are called the Lapita, and Dr. Pontus Skoglund, Swedish population geneticist and head of the Ancient Genomics Laboratory at the Francis Crick Institute in London, led a 31-author study published in Nature Journal, the most respected science journal in the world, that proved exactly where they came from. His team extracted DNA from ancient Lapita skeletons found at Teuma in Vanuatu, the oldest Pacific cemetery ever discovered. Those skeletons were 3,000 years old, and they were genetically almost identical to the indigenous peoples of Taiwan and the northern Philippines. Skoglund himself said, "The Lapita are a missing link to the Asian ancestry of all Pacific Ocean people today." Think about what this means. Every Hawaiian, every Maori, every Samoan, every Polynesian alive on Earth today carries Lapita ancestry, and that ancestry traces back through these islands, through these ocean crossings, all the way to Taiwan. But then, Skoglund's team found something that nobody expected. When they compared the ancient Lapita skeletons to the populations already living in the Solomon Islands, the Papuans, who had been there for 40,000 years, they found almost zero mixing between them. Almost zero. The Lapita moved through the Solomon Islands corridor like a ghost, present, sailing past, but not staying, not mixing. As if these two worlds, the ancient Papuan world and the new Taiwanese maritime world, looked at each other across the water and kept their distance. Skoglund put it plainly. The Lapita have no evidence for Papuan ancestry, so they sailed on, past the Solomons, into the open Pacific, building the greatest maritime civilization the ancient world had ever seen, and the Solomon Islanders watched them go. But here's the question nobody could answer. If the Lapita sailed through without mixing, then why do present-day Solomon Islanders carry both Papuan and Asian DNA in their genomes? Because something happened after the Lapita left, and it was not peaceful, and it was not small. 1,000 years after the Lapita sailed through, someone went back east, and they went back in force. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Jena, Germany, published findings based on ancient DNA from burial sites in Vanuatu spanning 2,900 years to 150 years of history. The earliest skeletons looked Taiwanese, Lapita, clean East Asian ancestry. The skeletons 400 years later looked Papuan. A wave of people, originating from the Bismarck Archipelago and the Solomon Islands chain, had pushed east and absorbed the Lapita descendants into their own population. Not through war, not through plague, through generations of demographic pressure, migration, and intermarriage. The BBC reported in March 2018 that the Max Planck team confirmed the Lapita settler population of Vanuatu was, and I am quoting directly, largely replaced by Papuan ancestry from this back migration, or one of the largest population replacements ever confirmed by ancient DNA, and no historical record of it was ever written. No one left a single word about it. But here is the twist that changes everything. The languages survived. The Austronesian languages that the Lapita carried, the root language family that spreads from Madagascar to Easter Island, are still spoken across Vanuatu, across the Solomons, across Polynesia today. The people changed, the genes changed, but the words stayed. And in the Solomon Islands today, communities that speak Austronesian languages and communities that speak ancient Papuan languages often live on the same island, side by side, and show no consistent genetic difference between them. The language boundary that scholars spent 2 centuries mapping does not correspond to any biological reality at all. Let me ask you something. If a people's language survives but their bloodline changes completely, Are they still the same people? There is no right answer. Write yours in the comments. Now the question becomes, where exactly did this back migration launch from? The answer is Bougainville. Bougainville is the northernmost island in the Solomon Archipelago, and it sits at the exact genetic hinge point between the ancient Papuan world and the Lapita colonized remote Oceania. The haplogroup M2 to M353, the one born in the Solomons 9,200 years ago, shows its highest frequency and diversity precisely among Papuan-speaking communities here. This is the genetic signature of the population that sent the back migration east, and Bougainville carries another genetic story too. In March 2026, some researchers published a new study showing that a Denisovan-derived DNA insertion in a gene called OCA2, a gene that controls skin pigmentation, is present in over 60% of Bougainville Islanders. The darker skin tone in these islands is not simply the result of sun exposure or random chance. It is a direct biological inheritance from an archaic species that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. A species that left no fossil, no face, no name, but whose genetic contribution is still, right now, today, being passed from mothers to children on these islands. The ancient species that left no ruins built something more permanent than stone. It built living people. In 2019, Bougainville held a referendum and voted overwhelmingly for independence from Papua New Guinea. The people there felt, deeply, instinctively, that they were different, that they were older, that their identity was theirs alone. The DNA agrees. But Bougainville's genome holds one more surprise. Hidden in the maternal lineages, the mitochondrial DNA passed only from mother to child, is a signal that nobody expected to find here. Asian DNA. In communities whose men carry entirely ancient Papuan paternal lineages, the mothers carry East Asian mitochondrial haplogroups at high frequency, and that asymmetry is one of the most important clues to how the Pacific was really peopled. Mitochondrial DNA tells a completely different story than the paternal record. A study of over 700 individuals from 18 Solomon Islands communities, published in the journal Molecular Biology and Evolution, found that maternal lineages in the Solomons show Asian-derived haplogroups at up to 72.6% frequency in some communities. 72.6%. While the fathers were Papuan, ancient, local, rooted, the mothers carried East Asian DNA. Dr. Pontus Skoglund summarized what this means. The female ancestors of modern-day Oceanians are mainly Lapita, whereas their male ancestors include Papuans. The mechanism of the Austronesian expansion across the Pacific was not military conquest. It was not colonization in the way we usually think of it. It was marriage. East Asian women were integrated, across many generations, into Papuan lineage communities. Their mitochondrial signature kept flowing forward, and then the Papuan men defined the paternal clan structure. The children became something entirely new, and here is the part that history books never told. This Asian maternal lineage appears even in Papuan-speaking communities that have no cultural connection to the Austronesian world. The DNA crossed every boundary that language and culture never crossed. Women carried a civilization's genetic memory into communities that did not even speak their language. And in many Solomon Island societies, land rights and identity are passed through the mother's line, matrilineally. The ancient DNA flows in exactly the same channel that cultural identity flows. Genetic memory and social memory running parallel for 3,000 years. History remembered the sailors, the navigators, the chiefs. DNA remembered the mothers. So where did those mothers come from? The ancient DNA trail leads to one specific place. Dr. Pontus Skoglund's team at the Francis Crick Institute showed that 3,000-year-old Lapita skeletons from the Pacific are genomically closest to the indigenous Ami people of Taiwan and the Kankanai people of northern Luzon in the Philippines, not distant relatives. Near matches, across 3,000 years of separation. A grandmother in the mountains of eastern Taiwan today carries mitochondrial DNA that closely matches a skeleton buried in a Pacific Island cemetery 3 millennia ago. And neither of them knows it. The Ami people of Taiwan do not know that their ancient ancestors launched the most ambitious maritime migration in the history of humanity. The Solomon Islanders do not know that across the Pacific, 6,000 miles away, people share their great-great-grandmother's biological signature and farm rice in mountain terraces and speak a language that is the ancestral root of their own. The Austronesian language family, spoken from Madagascar in the west to Easter Island in the east, from Taiwan in the north to New Zealand in the south, is the largest geographic language family in human history. Every single branch traces back to a proto-language spoken in Taiwan approximately 5,000 years ago. And the Solomon Islands sit right at the hinge point of that entire expansion, the place where the Taiwanese maritime world met the ancient Papuan world, where two completely different human lineages, one 40,000 years old on these islands, and one arriving fresh from Taiwan, produced a genetic combination that exists nowhere else on Earth. A 2021 study published in the journal PNAS by researchers at the University of Hawaii and the University of Washington confirmed that early settlers of Guam are also genomically linked to this same Lapita founding population, making the Solomon Islands corridor the central node in the entire Pacific web of human migration. And now, after everything we have uncovered, we are standing at the edge of what science still cannot explain. Consider what the Solomon Islands genome actually holds. The deepest Papuan ancestry in remote Oceania. East Asian mitochondrial lineages from the Lapita. Confirmed Denisovan and Neanderthal DNA. A Denisovan-derived pigmentation gene active in over 60% of Bougainville Islanders. Confirmed just this year in 2026. And a third archaic human lineage that has never been named, never been fossilized, and exists only as a ghost inside living people. No other archipelago on this planet carries this density of human evolutionary history, but here is the problem that keeps scientists awake. Ancient DNA degrades fast in tropical heat and humidity. The Institut Pasteur team in France has noted that most of the pre-Lapita genetic record of the Solomon Islands has already dissolved in the soil. The genomes that would answer the biggest questions: who were the very first arrivals? What was their exact relationship to the third archaic human? What happened in the 30,000-year gap between first settlement and the Lapita arrival are very likely gone forever. Somewhere on one of these 900 islands, in an unexcavated reef burial, there may be a skeleton dating to 20,000 years ago. Old enough to carry the third archaic human's genetic signature in high concentration. Old enough to answer questions the living genome can only whisper. No one has found it. No one is currently funded to look. The bone may dissolve before anyone thinks to search for it. A Solomon Islands elder once said something that has stayed with researchers who heard it. He said, "We came from the water and we will return to it. Everything in between is just a story." He did not know that genomics would one day confirm the first part of that sentence. His people came from the water, from multiple directions, not across tens of thousands of years, carrying layers of identity, Papuan, Taiwanese, Denisovan, Neanderthal, and something unnamed that no single story has ever held all at once. And until that 20,000-year-old bone is found, if it is ever found, the Solomon Islanders will remain exactly what their DNA has always said they are: the most genomically layered people on Earth, standing at the edge of every story we thought we knew about what it means to be human, and still holding a secret that science has not yet found the words to name. One last thing before you go. Our last video, Jewish DNA finally reveals their true origins, went deep into another ancient genetic mystery that rewrote what we thought we knew about one of history's most studied peoples. So if you watched it, tell me in the comments, what was the one thing in that video that surprised you the most? And if you have not watched it yet, the link is in the description. I promise you will not regret it.